Christian Concern hosted an open forum this week in central London, looking at how we should respond to our society's increasing rejection of its Christian heritage and hostility to the gospel. During the Gospel Truth Forum, two prominent Christian leaders, John Stevens, National Director of the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches, and Joe Boot, founding pastor of Westminster Chapel in Toronto and founder of the Ezra Institute for Contemporary Christianity, debated their different approaches to Christian engagement with contemporary culture.
John is absolutely right. We must exercise church discipline in the life of the church. We mustn't be hypocrites. But at the same time, we need to begin to take back all of these spheres where we relinquish the lordship of Jesus Christ. Education, medicine, charity, welfare, the state, all of these areas. The state, after all, is only a differentiated public. That's all it is. Why would gospel culture stop with my family and community? If that community becomes Christian, why would they not vote for Christian leaders who establish true worship within the state? That's the history of Christendom. I don't believe our forebears had it wrong for 1,500 years that we should have had a neutral state.
I think we might disagree to the extent to which we can engage in the use of common grace wisdom arguments in order to advocate for things like religious freedom, the extent to which we can use common arguments with those who are not Christian in order to build consensus, maybe on specific issues or specifically on religious freedom. So can we engage in co-belligerency with Muslims, with others, in the fight, for example, for a definition for marriage or for more general religious freedom and the legitimacy of doing that? I'd be wanting to say the church must never be less than prophetic, but there is a place for engaging on common grace grounds on those particular issues in order to persuade the hostile state to grant as much gospel freedom as might be permissible.
Both leaders then fielded a number of questions from the floor, including their thoughts on the significance of how Christian Concern is engaging with contemporary culture.
Yes, I think so, because basically, as I was saying, in the New Testament, the church took advantage of its legal rights in order to be able to advocate for religious freedom. And I think as we find Christians being oppressed and persecuted, we ought to seek to protect them and enable them to take advantage of the rights that the state has given them to them. I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't do that. That seems to me part of our advocacy for religious freedom. I think it's also important that we expose to the state kind of the unfairness of legislation where it's wrongly restricted Christians.
The reason that we can expect a cultural impact through organizations like Christian Concern is that the gospel is a culture. I expect a cultural triumph for the gospel because it's the cultus. If the gospel prospers, so will the transformation of the culture. And I think what Christian Concern is about is not trying to diminish evangelism, but I talked about there being prophets, the prophetic, priestly, and kingly responsibility that we have as Christians, and I think Christian Concern is functioning in a prophetic and I think a kingly aspect.
And afterwards, we asked a number of those attending the evening for their thoughts on the forum's topic of bringing gospel truth to our culture.
People themselves are starting to give up on Christianity itself, but by coming back to the roots of what it is all about, family and values, then that's how we can then bring it back into society.
As a Christian who's always tried to share my faith in my work as a teacher, as the opportunity comes, it's been really helpful to hear what the speakers were saying. It's helped me to understand better ways of articulating my faith.
We are the salt and the light of the world, and what we learn today is not just for our own benefit, but to go out there and be transforming agent and to help others who do not know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, that they too can come in and have their lives and have their home and have, in fact, society change for good.